want to talk to you a little bit about Torben. Um, he just put out that he lost his appeal and that he could be deported any day. So I'd like to hit a few key points, just some things that Torben has said, some options for him and for his family, because we're not dead yet, right? We have an opportunity to resist and to continue our work and to continue to broadcast, most importantly. I mean, in-person visits are cool, but it's nice to be free where we can at least have access to the airwaves, which you see that I do. I've been 2 years, over 2 years in Mexico as a solicitante de refugio, as an applicant for refugee status. And so this place is really it's the capital of the free world. Mexico's on the rise. Its government is advancing. Crime is going down, even though the immigration is a problem. There are other problems. You see that we are free here, and it's a wonderful place. So let's just look at a few points that Torben's brought up, and I want to start with this. Early on, Torben was pretty confident that no persecution would arise other than maybe some people not liking you. And that's part of the reason there's been some friction with him and I, is because I warned from the beginning that persecution was going to be very up close and personal, to include arrests. And now that that has happened, it's time to look at it differently, which Torben has done. One thing Torben has stated now is that no matter where he goes in the world, that his persecutors will follow him. This is just in his last release, his last call from prison that's on the TLR YouTube channel. And I think that that's too much of a pendulum swing. The word is very clear: when you're persecuted in one city, then flee to another and there preach. And so I've done that, and I have paved the way for others to come. There was even mockery against me that a person's status in a nation could be threatened, that we could lose it and not have a safety in that nation. And so, Torben, I'd just like to say to you and to your family, to my friend Lena, I just like to say that there's a free world left, and it's time to get there as quickly as you can. This is my original asylum claim. It's on my Twitter. Just go to Gospel Gunslingers on Twitter, and it's in Spanish, of course, but the entire document is there. You have to go back to June 30 of 2 years ago, so that's 2021. Before that, I had a lot of fun going around the United States. In 2017, meeting Torben Sondergaard in Northern California and giving him the right hand of fellowship and welcoming him into my nation, the United States. And I just like to do that again, because I have, this is a presidential claim. This is not a claim of someone who went and stood in line with the Haitians or got caught sneaking across the river at night. This is a claim that was put in directly to the president of the republic, who's a Christian, by the way, and has resisted greatly the Catholic Church having too much power in Mexico. He's resisted the Chinese. He's resisted the drug gangs. I'm just going to read you what this says about Torben. So this is 2 years old. The government, this has gone through every branch of the government and been thoroughly investigated. So there's an understanding of who these people are. And this talks about persecution coming against three classes of people. Trump supporters, or those who have been in favor of a conservative government in the United States. That's one. Two, journalists who have been seriously persecuted in the USA. And number three, preachers. And I named some people here. So let's just look. This is on the third page. And I'm going to go ahead and translate because it's in Spanish. But this says, these are my reasons for asking the Mexican president for safety here in Mexico. I am apoyente. That kind of means a supporter. It kind of means someone who is in favor with, or someone who is in support of, someone who is behind. I am a supporter of the preacher, the Danish preacher, Torben Sondergaard, who fled from his country, Denmark, because of his preaching. And he is right now in the United States as a refugee, with his refugee status in danger because of the anti-Christian government of Biden. So that's right there. It's right there on page 3. Tells about Torben Sondergaard, and Torben Sondergaard is already known to the Mexican government that he's a person that's looking for some peace and safety in the world. I'll go ahead and read you this one too. This is an update from September of 2021, because 2021 was a really big year. This is the year of the January 6th protests. And so the Department of Justice was weaponized. Lots and lots of people were swept up in the dragnet and thrown into the dungeon and thrown into the gulag. So here, this tells on page 2 about Torben Sondergaard. This one's not published, but here, I'll just put it where you can read it. There it is. And I'll read it to you, translating from Spanish. And these are things that Torben actually said that I've included in this document. Torben Sondergaard, and I name other people. Right here is named Sam Montoya, who took footage of Ashley Babbitt's murder inside the Capitol, that he was arrested in a kick-in. They broke in his door in a SWAT raid, a violent SWAT raid, and that he was freed under very strict conditions, that is, travel restrictions, confiscation of his documents, etc. Henry Enrique Tarrio was convicted and ordered to report to jail. I later said that I was concerned that further charges would be brought against him and he'd never be let out. So these are people that are involved politically that were persecuted. Now, journalists, Owen Schroyer was arrested and freed under very strict conditions. And these are all my friends, by the way, people that I've known and done broadcasts with and met in person and gone out on the town with. Some of them been in their homes. Harrison Smith is newly afraid for his life. This focuses a lot on Harrison Smith calling out suspicious deaths, and that he was in the category of the people who had suspiciously died. By the way, if you're out there watching, you are welcome to throw in a comment or a question, and I would ask you to share this message with the TLR people that are out there, especially Lena. Lena, I have some messages for you in this broadcast, so please stick around and please share the link if you can, if you're watching. All right, and then we go to Torben Sondergaard. So I'm going to translate from the Spanish, and I remind you, this is on the president's desk. Torben Sondergaard has lost confidence that his U.S. petition for asylum is going to advance well under the current administration. He has declared his intention to go to Mexico with his family. And then parenthetically, I say, and abandon his asylum claim in the United States. Now, Torben flatly said that he was coming to Mexico ahead of this date. So I just made sure to inform the president of what he had said and what he was planning to do. Okay, so the pendulum swung a little bit too far. You know, I'm going to go over some Bible verses here from 1 Peter. I just want to start with this one. This is 1 Peter 5:8. Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about, seeking whom he may devour. So for us as preachers, the enemy's out there. He's looking to get us any way we can, any way he can. And so we have to think about how we're going to keep ourselves safe from the adversary that's out there prowling around. And today, he's taken a lot of prey. A lot of people are going down. Okay, next up. Whom resist steadfast in the faith. So we are supposed to resist the adversary. We are supposed to not just allow ourselves with this martyr mentality to be taken down. imprisoned, and killed. We're supposed to resist the evil one that's out to devour us, whom resist steadfast in the faith, knowing that the same afflictions are accomplished in your brethren that are in the world. So, yes, there's persecution around the world. It was so in the time of the apostles, and the same Roman system is out there around the world right now. And that's what's driving this persecution. This is what drew me to Torben, as he spoke out clearly about Romanism and about false Christianity. And if you don't remember that, just go to the Reform School online, go to the online TLR Bible School, go to lesson 1, and the first minute, it goes right straight to Torben, goes straight to the Catholic Church and how we need to come out of their doctrine and their theology and out of their control. All right. Now, this is verse 10. We need to look at that we have this promise that we're going to be put in a prosperous place, that we're going to be put in a safe place if we hang on for just a little while. Verse 10, but the God of all grace, who hath called us unto his eternal glory by Christ Jesus, after that ye have suffered a while, make you perfect, establish, strengthen, settle you. So we can not only move to a place in our faith, and this is something that Torben preaches and teaches, we can come to a place in our faith where we're very difficult to reproach, one. And then the Lord will set us in a place where we are established, where we have roots down, and we can't just be blown about, and we can't just be thrown off of the site. Now, this is coming from somebody who's suffered it maybe more times than anybody out there, been chased around for decades, but nonetheless, the Lord is settling me. All right, so the Lord, after you've suffered a while, make you perfect, establish, strengthen, and settle you. So let's believe God for all those things, to be established, to be settled, and to be strengthened. And the opportunity is there here in Mexico. Now, about the asylum claims, which I have some very smart Christian lawyers, English speaking, and I also have done a lot of research on the president of Mexico and the asylum system in Mexico. And it's a very simple process to claim asylum. And then your case will be heard by a government bureau that just does that. It's called a COMAR, which is the Commission for Refugiados in a nutshell. So your case will be heard by that bureau. It'll be researched, and then certain rights and privileges are granted. And wouldn't it be nice to be in a great nation like Mexico and have a Mexican passport and be able to travel the world from Mexico and at least be able to preach from Mexico? You know, the Catholic Church is still strong in Mexico, but there are Protestant movements that are very strong and that have offered, that have given me credentials. If I am reproached for doing the work of God in Mexico, let's say I baptize a person or cast a devil out of somebody, and it causes a huge stir, which has happened before. Mostly good attention, but it can be bad attention also. And I've been in the police station for that. Well, right now, I'm part of a movement. And if they come against us, there are 1,000 of us, and they will stand along with their congregations and their they're non-registered preachers. There are a lot of non-registered or lay preachers. I don't really believe myself in a clergy laity distinction, but there are, aside from those 1,000 ministers, there are unregistered preachers and there are congregations, and they'll all stand with us, and they'll stand with you, Torben. They'll stand with you, Lena, as long as there are no scofflaws among us. And I think everyone knows that I had words with John Barnstein because he came to Mexico and laughed in my face that I might suggest that we had to be sober and be vigilant to safeguard our legal status here, and that there were some regulations and laws that we needed to comply with. Yeah, he laughed in my face about that, and about the fact that someone's presence in a nation could be threatened or revoked. And now it's out in the news. And Torben's still really hurt because he considers John a friend. I advised him to break with John, and perhaps his failure to do that is what caused the thunderstorm to catch up with him. Again, something that I'm not happy about, and I'm not going to say that it's the will of God and God's doing a great work in Torben and it needed to happen. No, there's generally an easy way and a hard way for God to get His work done on the inside of a person. And if we're supple in His hand, and if we're listening, then a lot of times we don't have to go through all of the getting raked over the coals. It still happens sometimes, but I wish that Torben would have come to Mexico. I messaged him 2 weeks before his arrest, and I told him, Torben, it's not too late for you to come to Mexico, but someday it will be. Well, when you're in jail, it's too late to just pack your suitcase and go across the border. Okay, so one thing about refugee law in Mexico is the spouse is included. The marital partner of a refugee is also a refugee. The marital partner of a solicitante, someone who is seeking refugee status, is included in their refugee claim. And so, even with Torben incarcerated, and I'm going to go over in a minute the difference between, and if anybody's out there, please remind me if I forget to discuss the difference between, it's in the title, between deportation and what's the other thing where you're turned over to face the charges? Extradition. Extradition. Okay, if Torben is deported, which right now in his case, he could be deported at any moment. I'm going to go to that in a minute. First, Lena, I want to talk to you. Your minor children, I'm not sure if your last daughter's of majority age yet, but any minor children of yours are automatically included in your claim, and your husband is automatically included in your claim. If you come to Mexico today and file for a refugee status, which happens that fast, then there's a process where your claim has to be heard over the coming days, et cetera, et cetera. If you do that, the claim is already open for Torben because he's your husband. Lena, I advise you to come to Mexico immediately. Come to Mexico immediately, and then we will, it's very easy to apply for a refugee status. And then Torben will be included in that. And because your case has already been 2 years on the president's desk, as I've been 2 years a refugee, Torben will be recognized very quickly. And then in the event that he's deported, he can go to Mexico. He can be deported to Mexico, where he'll have freedom and rights. There's no case against him here in Mexico. Okay, so if he has not established a foothold in another country like Mexico, when he's deported, they could very easily send him back to his country of origin, Denmark. If he has a foothold in Mexico, it will be very difficult for them to do that. And here's why. To give him over to the Danish government, where there are legal and civil cases against him, he has a right to fight extradition, which would be another legal process that could take 6 months, a year, or more. And the U.S. government really wants to be rid of him. They really want to get him out before this election season, et cetera, which is why they're talking about deporting him right now. And so when they deport him, if he has a foothold, he can say, I want to go to Mexico. If they tell him, no, we're going to send you to Denmark, your country of origin, he can say, if you send me to Denmark, if you try to take me to Denmark, I will fight extradition because I have open cases in Denmark. And because of that, they will gladly deport him to Mexico. So, Lena, you need to come to Mexico. Immediately, you need to come to Mexico. Reach out to me on gospelgunslingers.com. I'm in Mexico City right now. It's very difficult for me to be in Mexico City because my 2 years as a refugee, I'm not allowed to work in Mexico because I have suffered while all of these claims were being investigated and while wave after wave of political events have washed back and forth from Mexico to the United States and back and forth. And the economic difficulty that's happened there has caused my own little personal donor base to fall off incredibly. I was looking at my Subscribestar account, and there's nobody with me that was not there before 2021. All of the people, some people had signed up between 2022 and 2023. So basically, the years that I've been a refugee, but none of them, when I checked a week ago, were still with me. And so I had no new supporters on that platform. And many of my old supporters had dropped off, probably 2/3. And so it's been a very painful thing. And of course, I've had to continue my work preaching in jungle churches, getting the news out, doing my worldwide radio show, which I'm behind on paying for. Again, I have to pay for that transmission to go through all of Latin America and to bring the news and the word of God to all of the countries of the Americas. I want to talk a little bit. Okay, so yes, it's difficult for me to be in the capital, to be here in a hotel, dressed cleanly. I live out in small towns, where, by the way, we have a place for you. We have apartments there around the church property that that TLR people are invited to and can come and live in. I did a video showing the whole property. It's in Spanish. Maybe I'll put the link in the description if I can find all that later. But we have a nice property in a nice little town with lots of Christians, and they're waiting for the next wave of God's move. They're waiting for Torben and his disciples to come to that town and for it to be their base of operations to travel the world from. It's already established, and you are invited. Of course, we have to be good citizens of our guest nation. That shouldn't surprise anyone that we have to kind of behave. We're not a bunch of Arabs with diplomatic immunity that can just run around shooting, or the U.S. Mercs with diplomatic immunity go around the sandbox shooting, and none of that is good. I need to talk a little bit about the strength of Mexico as a nation. If you look at all of Spanish America, Mexico is far and away the most populous nation, the largest nation. It is the economically and agriculturally strongest nation. There are agricultural failures in many parts of the world, including the United States. And as that happens, food scarcity and food prices shoot up. It has increased in Mexico, but right now, and even in the future, the agricultural base of Mexico will ensure the reliability of the food supply, even when other nations lose that. And it's already begun, even in the United States. In many places, I'm not going to go into specifics, but there are problems with the supply chain and with the food supply chain. So there are a lot of nice countries. If you go further down into Central America, none of them remotely have the strength of Mexico. Now, Brazil is twice as big as Mexico, geographically, economically, and by population, but it's communist now. It's communist now. Chile's communist. Argentina's communist. Bolivia's communist. Ecuador and Peru are hanging on by their toenails, and there are riots and deaths and upheavals in the Congress and impeachments, and they're small nations. Paraguay, kind of the same thing. The Paraguayan government may hang on for a little while. I hope it does, but it's a small nation. Uruguay, their conservative government is hanging on, but it's a small nation. Mexico is a mighty nation. It's a mighty nation. The factories, if you see the factories of the city of Monterey that just go on for miles and miles and miles, it's unbelievable. The industry that's in Mexico, the advancement. And there are many very civilized, first world, modern cities. A lot of people speak English. You can walk down the street in safety. People drive respectably in some places, Other places, not so much. But all of those options are available. Listen, if you're in Europe, if you're part of the TLR movement, or you've begun to move in the things of God, or even if you've just don't like your nation gravitating towards communism, you can come to Mexico. Mexico is here. Mexico has always been open to tourists because they have a tourist industry. It's very good for the nation when people bring their money, and if they're going to halfway behave, some people come looking to buy kids and stuff, and that's a problem. But anyone who's going to bring their money and halfway behave and spend some of it in Mexico is welcome. You're welcome. You can come to Mexico and you can live in Mexico. And this is the new world. This is the free world. And Mexico City has always been, for 500 years, the capital of the free world and the capital of the new world. It's just that the US, Washington, actually Philadelphia, gained independence first and broke politically with Europe. And so Mexico had to then come after. Nevertheless, the historicity is that the capital of the free world is Mexico City, which has more than 100 embassies and scores of consulates beyond that. Maybe only in the 90s actual embassies to all the European nations, Japan, Asian nations, nations in Africa, and of course the rest of Latin America. This is the nerve center of the free world. And if you come here, you can continue to preach. I'm actually glad that some of the TLR people have gone a little bit underground and haven't so prolifically broadcast their whole life, from selfies of what they're eating for lunch and where they're at and what they're doing, because it's dangerous. We have to be sober and be vigilant in this hour. But the first step is finding that place to flee to, where you will be established and strengthened and settled. I'll tell you, it's nice to be settled. I have had to learn it in Mexico. Okay, this is the Lord's command in 1 Peter 5:2. Feed the flock of God. We have to continue the work of ministry. We don't stop the work of ministry when persecution comes. And for a lot of people in TLR, even though it's called pioneer, and pioneers have to deal with bears, wolves, and wild Indians all the time, even so, this is the first round of persecution, of physical persecution. Everybody knows, as a Christian, some people aren't going to like you and invite you to their parties, but this is the first round of persecution for a lot of people around TLR. And this is why a lot of TLR people haven't known what to think about me, because my message from the beginning has been persecution is coming. Prepare yourself to deal with persecution. And a lot of people thought that they'd be getting out of faith. It was their own faith that kept the persecution at bay. It's kind of a silly and really a theology tainted with the heresy of pacifism. It is a theology tainted with the heresy of pacifism, because persecution is part of the deal. We inherit the kingdom with persecutions, but we're commanded to continue to feed the flock of God, which is among you, taking the oversight thereof, not by constraint, but willingly, not for filthy lucre, but of a ready mind. And so, there's a command not to dig too deep in everybody's pockets. I still have to ask to get in people's pockets a little, because here I am writing like Paul, the Lord's prisoner. Okay, I'm free, but I don't cross the Rio Grande. Partly because of what they did to Torben, because what I knew was coming. I've been a refugee since a year before Torben was arrested. This is just interesting. Chapter 5, verse 1, the elders which are among you, I exhort, who am also an elder and a witness of the sufferings of Christ. and also a partaker of the glory which shall be revealed. You know, the anointing and the presence of God is promised here for us in the last days that are persecuted, that there's going to be another spike in the anointing, that the Lord's power is going to increase once again. And when that happens, then we can, we'll have this option to be a partaker of the glory that shall be revealed. And here where it says elder, I like to call myself an elder because it's a very uncomfortable question that people ask. What are you and what are you? Well, I'm an elder. You know, where Peter says this in my Spanish Bible, this actually says ancianos and anciano. I speak to the ancients, and I also am an ancient. And so, if we must have an apostolic convention between the grand masters, I also am an ancient, and I speak to the ancients. I speak to Torben. I speak to Lena, the lady elder. Come to Mexico. All right, you know we're supposed to resist the adversary, right? Yes. I'm going to skip over to the next chapter in the Word, which is 2 Peter 1. We must remember that we're called to glory and to virtue, not only to imprisonments. Okay, that's part of it. And I've been beaten up a lot this year, fighting the drug traffickers and their devils. Their demonic power is unreal. And I've been standing against it with virtually zero help from all of you. Definitely from the TLR movement, there's been zero help. In fact, from there, it's been another source of adversity, really for no reason. But we're called to glory and to virtue. So to we are called to be in a prosperous place. And virtue, that's power. We are called to receive the increase in the anointing. All right. Verse 4, whereby are given unto us exceeding great and precious promises, that by these ye might be partakers of the divine nature, having escaped the corruption that is in the world through lust. You know, we're supposed to escape. Now, part of this is spiritual, and we escape within our inner self the corruption and the sin. But part of it is that we're supposed to escape. We're supposed to flee persecution. We're supposed to run and actually make good our getaway. Especially in the US of A, we've got this in our mind that you can't ever actually get away, that you can't outrun the radio. That's a saying from the 70s. That, yeah, you can hit the accelerator when the cops turn to chase you, but they'll radio for another car to be waiting ahead. You can't outrun the radio. Well, now we've got the 2.0 Big Brother version of that. And a lot of people think that you cannot get away. And this is why I teach every day about and tell about a lot of miraculous getaways, because we're called to escape. It's right here in 2 Peter 1:4. And I want to draw your attention to verse 8, that it's possible to be barren and it's possible to be unfruitful if we're not obedient. God bless you, Amy. Thank you for coming along. It's very possible to become barren. That is to not win souls and to not reproduce after ourselves. It's one of our biggest warnings as Christians that we can move into a place where we become barren and we're no longer soul winners. And we can become unfruitful. We can come to the place where the fruits of the Spirit and the power of God and the demonstration of God's power around us is not happening. And here's a warning from 2 Peter that all that can happen and how we avoid it. By escaping. So please escape. Verse 10, this is really important. Listen, I'm not a bearer of bad news that we have to run and hide. Just like the president of Mexico in the 1860s had to run and hide and then run the revolution from Chihuahua. But he advanced back to Mexico City, got his armies together, took over the castle of Chapultepec, and executed the European emperor, Maximilian. So you see, there's good news on the other side of persecution. Verse 10, wherefore the rather, brethren, give diligence to make your calling and election sure. For if you do these things, ye shall never fall. And then the next verse says, and you'll have an entrance into ministry. So let's do that. Let's get established, strengthened, and settled, and get in a position where we can push forward in prayer and in evangelism to the next place, to get that glory and to get that virtue and to get to the place where we never fall. It's promised right here. There's a place we can go that will never fall. For we have not followed cunningly devised fables. There's such a thing as a cunningly crafted hoax, but we don't have to be part of that. That's enough from 1st and 2nd Peter. Please come to Mexico. All workers of the cross, all people who want to continue to be free, all people who do not feel called to the prison ministry. When John decided that he would escalate and raise his voice against me, I asked him, I said, do you feel called to the prison ministry? Because some changes need to be made. Unless you feel a call to the prison ministry. Do you feel a call to the prison ministry? Of course, once they're in prison, everybody says that they were called to the prison ministry. But I'd like to challenge you that we're not all called to the prison ministry. We wind up in the prison ministry because we failed to escape. We failed to flee. We failed to go to the place that where God could and would strengthen, establish, and settle us. Come to Mexico. I'm very easy to find on gospelgunslingers.com. And please support our work in exile. You know, I have a lot of work to do on this property. I've done a lot of it with my own hands, built this place and gotten it up and running, gotten the toilets fixed that the apostle built 20 years ago, gotten everything exterminated. It's almost ready. But our command center still needs work. So please consider, aside from coming, please consider helping us to get our safe place established and strengthened and settled. So I'm asking you to sow financially. I really need to stay in the capital for a little while. And I live like an American here. It's extremely expensive. And right now, I have zero. I have to put my electronics away, zip my bag up because my time runs out here in an hour. So consider that. Even though we have safety politically, we still need to ask for our partners to partner with us financially, and so that I can be ready to receive and to help anyone who would be obedient to the word of the Lord. Reach out to me on gospelgunslingers.com. You can message me there. You can message me here on YouTube. If you follow my Telegram, you can message me instantly on Telegram. Just go to t.me/gospelgunslingers, and that's my Bible verse of the day. You know, I haven't been doing a verse of the day. And do you know why that is? Because nobody wants to pay for it to be broadcast. Some people come around for Bible study, but nobody wants to buy me a cup of coffee every morning. And that's what it costs, $10 a day. So, and I'm amazed that nobody will buy a preacher a cup of coffee for him and for themselves to have the Bible study all ready for him. We're not even talking about paying our living expenses. Just the broadcast is $10 for it to go to every Christian radio in a city, or maybe I'll go on political radio stations. But just for that. I haven't been doing them because nobody wants to step forward and be good for that $10 a day. That's amazing to me. It's amazing that the apathy. Okay, my friends, God bless you. Please reach out. I also have a Twitter and X platform. Just go to Gospel Gunslingers. My Cash App address is right on there. We're easy to find, and we invite you to partner with us and to be part of the gospel, getting out to the rest of the world. And I would remind you that even as TLR has gone underground, and even those who are actively out there doing kickstarts and praying for people in the streets, there are very few broadcasts of that. And I have continued to broadcast, not only on these little free telephone platforms, but I have a worldwide broadcast that goes to all the USA and Canada, the Caribbean Sea, all those islands, including communist Cuba, including the islands of Venezuela, communist Venezuela, and Colombia. My broadcast breaks into there with the word of God and the real news and the reality of the political situation. So I've been able to do all of that. In fact, it has snowballed and gotten a lot bigger during the very same time when TLR has been ground to a halt. So you want to be part of getting back in gear, come to Mexico. I invite you. God bless you. Bye-bye.